Welcome back to Reddit Untold, where the pettiest revenge and the most satisfying payback stories on the entire internet come to life. I have got a whole stack of them for you today, the kind where someone pushed the wrong person one too many times and paid for it in ways they never saw coming. And before we dive in, do me one quick favor. If you enjoy stories like these, tap that subscribe button right now. It is completely free, it takes 1 second, and it genuinely helps this channel grow more than you could imagine. Seriously, hit subscribe, and you will never miss a new batch. Now, get comfortable, and let us get into it. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. It's been years since my parents made me feel like an ATM for their family, but today they finally got what's coming to them. My name is Alex, and I'm 35 with a wife and 2 kids. For as long as I can remember, we lived in our small suburban house on the edge of town, my parents' house. They always referred to me as the family ATM. My sister, Emma, was supposed to be the successful one. She got her PhD from Harvard and is now a researcher at MIT, while I'm just another nobody with a mediocre job at a local bank. They'd boast about her achievements in front of our relatives every holiday, completely ignoring me. But you know what? It wasn't enough for them. My parents needed more than just empty words. For 6 years, without them ever knowing, I silently subsidized their mortgage payments. Every month, out of sight and mind, I'd make a $230 transfer to the family account. A small price compared to the love my sister supposedly brought into our home. Then came Thanksgiving last year. My parents were trying to squeeze in one more visit before the holiday season, and as usual, they regaled everyone with tales of Emma's success. My sister was making $250,000 a year at MIT, while I was struggling in a job that paid barely over minimum wage. I had to bite my tongue so hard it bled. And then, dinner rolls were passed around, and the wine poured, and everyone gathered for their annual holiday speech. My mom cleared her throat, and everyone turned to Emma. "Emma," she began, "we're here because of you." They all nodded in agreement. I was about to lose my balance and say something, but then it hit me. Enough is enough. I stood up slowly, trying not to look too upset. "Mom? Dad?" I said softly as I walked over to the buffet table with a stack of papers. There were 24 statements printed out in neat columns. Each one showed dates, amounts, and the transactions that paid for this house bit by bit. I placed them on the table, taking a deep breath. "Guys," I began, my voice steady but cold. "You might not remember these, but I've saved all of them. 6 years ago, you needed help paying your mortgage because you lost your job. You told me it was only for a little while. But here are the real numbers. $140 per month, every single month, until you got back on your feet."
Stop the video for a second because I need to give you an important heads up first. I want you to picture 2 people, same phone, same job, same 3 hours a day on that screen. Person 1 watches videos the way everybody does. Scroll, watch until the battery dies. At the end of the month, person 1 has nothing to show for 90 hours. Not 1 cent. Person 2 watches the exact same videos, but inside an app that pays for watch time. Same couch, same hours, same content. The only difference on the screen is a counter going up. Finish a video, it adds. Start the next, it adds again. That is the entire difference between them. And before you ask, no raffle, no gambling, no credit card, and nothing to pay to start. Person 2 did one thing person 1 never did. Went through the link and made an account in a minute. That is it. 1 minute of setup, once. And then the day runs exactly like it did before. Open the list of available videos, pick whatever you want, and watch it like you always have. One rule, and it is the one that separates them. Let the video finish. A started video does not count. When the balance hits the minimum, person 2 taps withdraw and asks for the money. Person 1 keeps scrolling, and I want to kill the obvious objection right now because person 1 always says the same thing. This must be a scam, or it must cost something. It costs nothing to find out. An email, a password, under a minute, and no card details asked for at any point in the process. So the risk in this comparison is not money. The risk is another month of person 1, which you have already run several times. Person 2 did not do anything heroic. They just did the same night, in the same place, inside a different app for a few days in a row. And by the end of the week, the gap between the two is not talent or discipline. It is a setup that took 60 seconds, and the gap does not come from effort. It comes from the bus, the line, the 10 minutes before bed. The link is pinned in the first comment below. Tap it and you switch which one of the two you are. On a TV or computer, point your phone camera at the code on screen and it takes you straight there. Those dead minutes are where most of Person 2's balance came from, not from extra hours. There are people living the second version all over the world right now, in the same day as you. Nobody here is smarter. One of them just decided that the time was worth charging for. Give it 10 minutes and watch the counter yourself. That is a cheaper test than another month at zero. Tomorrow you get the same day again. You only choose which of the two people you are in it.
Over 6 years, that's over $36,000 in my bank accounts. There were gasps and hushed whispers around the table. My sister's face went pale as I continued. Now, this doesn't take away Emma's success or her achievements, I said, trying to keep it together. But what it does show is that every single one of you has seen me struggle for years and nothing came out of my mouth. Nothing. A heavy silence fell over the room before my dad spoke up, his voice shaking. Alex, why are you doing this now? I looked at him coldly, trying not to laugh. Because it's time I showed everyone here what's really going on. And because I've had enough of hearing that everyone was better off without me. My parents tried to deny everything, but the truth was too clear. The room filled with awkwardness and silence. I stepped away from them, walking back towards my seat. As the night ended, I heard Emma whisper to her husband, I don't know who's more screwed now. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. My name's Jack, but you can call me Jax. Let me set the scene. I had a pretty standard life growing up with my parents, Mike and Karen, and my sister, Lily. Mom always said she wanted me to have a better life than hers. And when I graduated college with a nice job in tech, it looked like that dream was going to come true for me. But then came the housing market crash, and my parents, who were already living on the edge, couldn't make the payments. Instead of getting foreclosed on, they talked me into helping them out. Mike even said I could earn ownership through a series of monthly checks, a sweet way to feel like I was contributing. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Over 6 years, I wired $86,000 into the account Mike told me was just for the house. I kept meticulous records, every transaction with notes on what date and why I paid, rental deposits, property taxes, and repairs. They never asked for receipts from me or complained about how I managed their money. In return, they promised to hand over a 50% stake in the house when they retired. But then it happened. They quietly added Lily's name to the deed while I was away on business. By the time I got wind of it, they had already signed the papers at the county clerk's office. When I confronted Mike and Karen about it, they acted like they didn't know what I was talking about. Then, when I pulled out my records, they started getting defensive. Mike finally admitted they wanted to split the house equally between Lily and me. But this wasn't just about splitting the profits. It felt like they were breaking a promise and disregarding all my efforts. So, I went straight to the county clerk. It was an old woman named Betty with thick glasses and a stern demeanor who explained what an equitable lien is. You see, she said, the law allows you to claim those payments as part of your interest in the property. She handed me paperwork detailing how much I contributed, every single transaction laid out neatly. Armed with this knowledge, I called a lawyer. They confirmed that my records could be used to establish an equitable lien. After several meetings and a lot of negotiation, we agreed on a settlement where they would give me 60% ownership plus an additional $15,000. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was enough to cover the mortgage and my legal fees. At the end of the day, Mike and Karen were furious when I walked out with the keys to the house. They tried to argue that they should keep their promise, but I told them about Betty's explanation. You might have added Lily's name, I said, but you can't ignore what was actually paid for this place. I'm not saying my life is perfect now. There are still times when I wonder if I made the right choice by going to war with my family. But at least now there's a record of what happened here, and that's worth something. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /SweetRevenge. When my dad took his family for Thanksgiving dinner at my restaurant without telling them, little did they know their old-fashioned gratitude would be repaid in unexpected ways. So let's rewind to that fateful Thanksgiving day. It started off like any other gathering. My dad wanted the whole family together and chose our place because he thought it was the best way to keep things traditional. He knew all about my restaurant, but in a father's protective way, he didn't mention I owned it. It was a small gathering of 14 relatives, mostly his side. We had the usual suspects: Aunt Martha, Uncle Bob, Cousin Sue, and so on. My dad sat down at our regular table, and before long, the whole family joined him. The table filled up with conversations about old times, food, and just general small talk. I served them like any other day. But when it came to the check, things got interesting. In my head, I was already anticipating a surprise, like having them believe they were paying an employee instead of their own father's daughter. When the bill arrived, Uncle Bob, always trying to be funny, said, "Let's tip well for such great service." And that's when everything went according to plan. "So, how much do you think we should leave?" he asked me. I looked at him and then over to my dad, who was clearly uncomfortable. "That's on your father," I replied. "Your father?" Uncle Bob said with a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Yes, it's his generosity that will ensure we have good food here for years." And there it was, the moment when everyone's eyes landed on him like they were seeing him in an entirely new light. He paid the bill without any objections or questions, just a look of confusion mixed with gratitude. It wasn't until later, as we left the restaurant together, that he looked at me and said, "I didn't expect this." "Well," I replied, "sometimes it's about making things right, even in small ways." The after effects were immediate. My dad tried to make amends by offering me extra shifts or giving me a cut of his next business venture, but I wasn't interested in that sort of repayment. Instead, I enjoyed the satisfaction of seeing him squirm just a little bit. Now, let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. In today's story, we dive into the revenge tale of a man who lost more than just trust in his sister. His grandfather's 90-acre farm and a piece of family history sold out from under him. Let's get started. I had been deployed for 6 months when my sister, Sarah, decided she'd take matters into her own hands. She had always handled the financial stuff for our grandparents, so when they moved to a retirement community and I was out of reach, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. Little did she know that things were about to get messy. One evening, I got a call from my grandmother. It was urgent. She sounded on edge. "Tommy, honey," she began, her voice trembling. "Sarah sold the farm without telling you or anyone else." I froze. The farm had been in our family for generations. It wasn't just land to us. It held memories of summers spent fishing and hunting with my grandfather. "What do you mean, sold?" I asked. "Sarah says she needed money and found a buyer who wanted to buy quickly," my grandmother replied. "But Grandpa had something planned." I was floored. Sarah's actions were out of line, but Grandpa? Grandpa hadn't just died. He'd actually created another will just before he moved into the retirement community. In it, he named me as the sole heir to everything. So there I was, stuck in a desert with nothing better to do than think about how my sister had bypassed both of our grandparents and snatched up something that belonged to me by right. When I finally got back home after 6 months, Sarah and our parents were at each other's throats. They knew I would find out eventually, and they wanted to handle it before I did. Sarah tried to brush it off with an apology, but I couldn't forgive her so easily. I decided to take things into my own hands. I reached out to the lawyer who had filed Grandpa's second will. He was more than willing to help me reclaim what was rightfully mine. We set up a meeting and went over every detail of the case. The lawyer confirmed that while Sarah had indeed sold the farm, the second will would ultimately prevail. The next step was tricky but necessary. I contacted the buyer who had purchased the land. I started by sending them an email. "I'm Tom, grandchild of the previous owner. I recently discovered a second will that you are not aware of. The farm is legally mine now." Silence for a day, and then, "We've done our due diligence," the buyer replied. "This has already been sold." Screwed. I had to up my game. I went public with it all, posting on social media and Reddit to get support. I was careful not to name names too much, just enough to hint that something wasn't quite right. People started to take notice. They asked questions about the farm's history, about my grandparents, and about what happened. It worked. Social pressure started to build. The buyers didn't want bad press. So, they agreed to buy it back from Sarah at a steep price, twice what she had sold it for originally. They knew better than to risk negative publicity with the community and the media, which had taken an interest. I used that money to hire another attorney who could argue in court over the second will. My lawyer was sharp. He presented airtight evidence of the second will's authenticity and legitimacy. After months of legal maneuvering, we finally won. The farm was back in my hands at last. It wasn't just the land, it was peace of mind. Sarah had to sell everything she'd paid for, her car, her house, just to pay off the buyer. She moved out with nothing but her pride and a hefty mortgage on her way. In the end, justice prevailed. I got what was rightfully mine, and my family's history wasn't tainted by betrayal anymore. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. It started when my grandmother passed away, leaving a $31,000 college fund to my family. I was supposed to get it all and move out of state for school. Instead, my mom decided to use every single penny on my older brother's new truck. You might think the issue would be simple. Just tell him he can't drive that thing, right? Wrong. My mom is a master manipulator, always putting her kids first, even when they're not me. So even though I had no right to touch this fund, she convinced me it was fair because my older brother needed the truck for his job. I swallowed hard and let it go until one day, he got into a minor accident that left him with a fat fine. He was freaking out about money and started begging her for loans. That's when I realized something was off. The bank balance in his account? Gone. Mom had used the college fund to pay cash for the truck instead of investing it. I couldn't just sit idly by while she stole from me, especially since all my friends were moving away. So I made a deal with myself. I would step up and help out however I could. I applied for loans and got them approved, making sure to keep everything in his name so the blame wouldn't fall on me. We've been friends ever since. But after that first loan he had no business getting, I was done. I started by co-signing a small car loan for him with a modest interest rate, thinking I could get him out of debt soon enough. He drove it like a maniac, and within 6 months, the thing was totaled in an accident. No worries, just another loan to pay it off. I did that 3 times before he started coming home every night talking about his latest investment schemes. I started asking more questions. Turns out his investments were actually buying illegal drugs. This guy was using my loans to fund a drug deal, and when the cops showed up at their apartment, they found him with over $10,000 in cash. I didn't just co-sign anymore. Now I was the one signing off on every loan he applied for. And then came the moment of truth, an actual payday loan for $400 that his income alone couldn't cover. I knew if my name appeared on this loan, it would be a clear signal to everyone that something wasn't right. I told him I was sick of lending money and co-signing everything. I said, listen up, I'm done being your ATM or a co-signer for whatever dumb stuff you're doing. I've had enough. Silence. Then he got this look on his face like he knew exactly what was coming. You're stopping, he said deadpan. I nodded and pulled out my phone. That's right. I'm removing myself as co-signer on every single loan that is in your name or involves you directly. This includes the one with the $400. You'll have to handle it now. His eyes went wide. He scrambled for words, trying to plead and beg, but all he could do was mumble about how I just couldn't be serious. But I am. And boy, did that feel satisfying. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. Quick pause. If that one got you, smash the like button. One tap, it costs you nothing. And it is the single biggest thing that pushes these stories to more people. And drop a comment. Would you have had the nerve to do the same? I read them. Alright, next one. This was posted to our /malicious compliance. My parents had just held one of those typical family dinners where everyone pretends to be civil despite the years of sibling rivalry and bitterness. We were sitting around a big table, plates piled high with fancy dishes, but my brother's fork had been reaching for the best food like always. I was stuck with the leftovers. I couldn't help but notice how they seemed to ignore me the entire time. They would make small talk about my brother's business success, but when it came to mine, they just nodded and went on to discuss his ventures. It got to a point where I had enough. They gave my brother $50,000 for a business, and then handed me $50 at the same dinner, like I was some kind of sidekick in their little money game. Then came the final straw. My parents announced that they needed a new roof. I didn't even know if my house had a roof, but apparently, this was a major upgrade for them. They looked straight at me and said, "We want you to fix it." No other option was given. It was as if they were treating the whole situation like a joke. In that moment, I decided enough was enough. I took out my phone and started searching for quotes from roof contractors. After an hour of browsing, I found one with good reviews and reasonable prices. The total came to around $4,000. Not bad. My parents should have given me more than $50. I typed up a message on their group chat. "Hey guys, the contractor just gave me a quote for your new roof. Total comes to $4,000, and I'll be happy to do it since I'm supposed to be paying for everything anyway. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with messages from both of them. My dad fired back first. Are you sure about this number? That seems way too high. I replied, I checked the market. It's spot on. You can save me a trip by agreeing now. My mom chimed in next, saying, well, think about it. How about if we split the cost? I smiled to myself, knowing full well they were just trying to avoid paying what they thought was too much. I typed back, fine. But remember, you asked me for help with this. If we need anything else done around your house in the future, don't expect me to do it without compensation. My brother sent a message saying, bro, stop being so bitchy. Let's just split the cost. I replied sarcastically, you're the one who got $50,000 for your business, and I get $50. So yes, I'll be bitchy until you recognize that I deserve respect too. The rest of the evening was awkward. They couldn't look me in the eye when they asked about my day or if I wanted seconds. It felt good to finally have them see that I'm not just a second-class family member. After the dinner, I sent the final invoice with an attached picture of the quote from the contractor. A few hours later, I received a message asking if the bill could be paid by direct transfer. They were embarrassed and wanted to make sure they handled it gracefully. The whole ordeal took less than 2 days, but boy, did my parents learn their lesson. They finally started treating me like an equal, even if just for a little while. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /petty revenge. I had always known that my parents were unreasonable, but this crossed the line. My name is Sam, and starting from when I turned 16, they started charging me rent. At first, it seemed like a minor annoyance, $400 a month for a small room in their house. But as time went on, those receipts piled up in my desk drawer, and so did the resentment. Now, at 60 years old, I was still living at home. Sure, there were some perks, family dinners, my parents' collection of antiques, and the occasional offer to mow the lawn for free. But those $48,000 in receipts seemed to outweigh any benefits. So, when they finally asked to move into the spare room I had converted into a home office, I decided it was time to pay them back with interest. It started on a cold evening. My dad sat me down and said, son, we've been talking about this for years. We're getting old, and our house is going to be empty soon. It'd be great if you could let us move in. I nodded, feeling my gut twist. I knew what was coming next. Sam, Mom chimed in with her usual sugary sweetness. We've kept all the receipts. We've been paying your rent faithfully for years now. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. This had been brewing for a while, but today it felt like it was finally time to settle accounts. Mom, Dad, I said slowly, I understand you need help, but those $48,000 in receipts are mine now. And here's the deal. You're moving into my home on a lease basis. They looked at each other, their expressions changing from surprise to anger. What do you mean by that? Dad demanded. Let's make this simple, I said, spreading out the papers across the table. I'm returning your $48,000 in receipts and setting up a new lease for $750 per month for each of you. There was silence as they processed what I had just said. Finally, Mom huffed. Sam, we're not kids anymore. We can pay our own way, she spat. I understand that, Mom. That's why the rent is only $750 per person instead of your usual $400. But this is about fairness and mutual agreement. Dad folded his arms across his chest. You're trying to kick us out? No, I'm asking you to be part of my life on equal terms, I said firmly. After an uncomfortable pause, Mom sighed heavily. Fine, she said grudgingly, her eyes flickering with irritation. We'll sign the lease. I nodded and pulled out a template from online. Let's get this done. We spent the next hour going over the terms of my custom-made lease. They were reluctant throughout, but I made sure to explain every detail clearly. By the end, they reluctantly signed their names. I handed them their keys to the spare room and watched as they shuffled into it with heavy footsteps. It felt like a small victory. The walls of their bedroom remained bare, no possessions, just an empty bed and a few boxes. I let out a long breath. Good night, parents, I said, walking away from my childhood home that now felt more like a temporary space. Sitting in the living room, sipping tea, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Maybe this would be a new chapter for us all. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /pro_revenge. I remember the day like it was yesterday. It felt as if the universe had just dished out a sweet slap in the face. My aunt, Eliza, she was like that weird aunt who always called you for her grandkids' birthdays and never brought a card. Well, she left me $340,000 on a whim. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wow, that's a lot of money. But let's just say it wasn't exactly how I expected my inheritance to come. I'll be honest, when the lawyer called, I was sipping coffee in my small apartment, trying not to look like I knew what Eliza had planned. The call came out of nowhere. Eliza wasn't even on my radar anymore. But there she was, with a thick stack of papers and a stern look that said, "I've got something for you." The lawyer started, his voice calm but firm. "Ms. Eliza Jackson has passed away and has left behind an estate valued at $340,000. I couldn't hide my surprise. The lawyer continued, "And the trust specifies one beneficiary, Alex Mott." My parents were already buzzing with plans for the money before they even knew it was mine. They immediately called a family meeting to discuss how the inheritance would be divided. I could hear Eliza's phone on speaker as she tried to explain what her will said. "Alex, it says right here," the lawyer's voice echoed from my bedroom phone, "that you are the sole beneficiary of this trust." I listened, half-jokingly thinking, well, guess who won't be going hungry anytime soon? My parents were in a tizzy. They were used to being the center of all financial decisions. They couldn't handle not being able to control how this money was spent. The lawyer went on, "You can access it when you turn 30, but until then, it is locked up and cannot be touched." I took that as a cue to sit back and watch the chaos unfold. My parents were livid. They started trying to pressure me into giving them early access. "Why would your aunt leave her hard-earned money for years? That's not fair," my father ranted. At first, I didn't say much, just letting their accusations fly. But as days turned into weeks, I started to toy with the idea of leaving a few messages to keep the tension alive. One day, I decided to give them something they'd never expect. I went through Eliza's old phone and found a voicemail from when she was still alive. It wasn't a big deal, just her trying to get me into one of her ridiculous family gatherings, but it worked. I left my parents a voicemail. "Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. Remember that time you tried to guilt-trip me into coming to the wedding? I think you're still holding on to those old feelings. Maybe Eliza had something to do with this." The next day was pure gold. They accused each other of being too pushy and not respecting my privacy. "Who would have thought your aunt was playing games like this?" my mother said, her voice tinged with accusation. I let the game drag on for a few more weeks before finally stepping in. "Guys, I just got a call from Eliza's lawyer," I said, mimicking the same calm tone as before. "She left me $340,000 and said it should be used responsibly until my 30th birthday." My parents looked at each other with wide eyes. They had no idea their own daughter was pulling these strings behind their back. After that, things got a bit out of hand. They started begging for early access or threats to sell the house if I didn't give them more money. I just laughed and left it be until their frustration reached its peak. Finally, one evening after dinner, they confronted me. "How could you do this to us?" my mother asked, tears in her eyes. "We thought we were your family." I took a deep breath and said, "Listen, Eliza was very specific about the trust details. I can't access it until I turn 30, but maybe you should focus on enjoying the money she left for you." They went back to their planning meetings, thinking they could still outsmart this whole mess. But by then, I had already moved into a nicer apartment and was paying off some debts with the trust funds. In the end, my parents never got access to that $340,000 early. They started mulling over whether Eliza truly intended to isolate me from them, or if she just wanted her money to be managed responsibly until I came of age. And as for the aftermath, well, let's just say it gave a whole new meaning to family dynamics. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /pro_revenge. I never thought my sister would do something as petty as that. She moved out years ago when our parents were still healthy, claiming she needed a fresh start, but really just wanted her own space away from Mom and Dad. The whole family knew it wasn't an innocent parting of the ways. There was always a bit of tension. Mom was in her late 70s by then. She'd started to show signs of memory issues and became a little more dependent on others. Dad, bless him, was trying his best, but clearly found himself stretched thin between running the business and taking care of Mom. That's when my sister threw a major wrench into things. She applied for power of attorney, which isn't unheard of as an older sibling might feel protective or helpful, But it wasn't supposed to be so one-sided. She didn't hide her intentions. She wanted full control over our mother's affairs, citing vague reasons related to managing the family wealth. One day, Mom had a small seizure at home and ended up in the hospital. While we were worried sick, my sister was nowhere to be found. Dad kept us all on tenterhooks until they finally discharged Mom. When she came back, things started getting really weird. Mom was acting strangely. She seemed confused about her surroundings, like something big had changed, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what. She mentioned to me one day that our house, the family home we grew up in, wasn't under my name anymore. I immediately felt a chill run down my spine. A few months later, Dad broke down and told us the real story. He showed us the documents, the power of attorney, all legalese, but with one line that left us speechless. It stated clearly that she could act in her own interest regarding property decisions. It was then we realized how much damage had been done. So, at our family meeting, this should have never come to this. I stood up and read the document aloud. My sister sat there, frozen, as I pointed directly at the offending clause. Everyone gasped. Dad looked anguished. Mom just seemed lost. But then, for the first time in years, she turned her gaze on my sister. "Let me remind you," I said, "of our bond and of the rules we always followed when it came to family property." I could feel everyone's eyes boring into us, but I had to make this moment count. This document states clearly that acting in your principal's interest is paramount. And yet, my mother has been treated with disrespect. I took a deep breath, leveling my voice. "Mom, remember the day we all went on that trip? The one where we promised to always watch each other's backs? Remember that promise?" My sister tried to scoff, but there was something in her eyes I couldn't ignore. After that meeting, everyone saw things differently. My sister's face had changed. She started acting more like a family member again instead of the entitled brat she seemed determined to be. Our mom slowly began to regain some clarity. It wasn't perfect. She's still dealing with memory issues, but at least now there was accountability and respect. So, let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /Sweet Deal Hunter. Alright, folks, here's a story that hits close to home. You know how it feels when you play by the rules only to find out someone forgot to include you in the picture? Well, I'm going to tell you about my summer vacation gone sour and the revenge I served up that was sweet enough for everyone. I worked hard for these family vacations, splurging $9,200 on a luxury beach house every year for 4 summers. We had the place to ourselves, no kids, just us adults having fun under the sun. The only problem? Every year, they'd arrange these group photos with me left out like I didn't even exist. It was frustrating enough back then, but by our last summer together, it was almost unbearable. One day, while browsing through past summers on social media, looking for some good memories, I saw that familiar photo. But something was different. This time, everyone's faces were turned toward the camera, and my name wasn't even mentioned in the caption. I felt like I'd been completely airbrushed out of my own experiences. That's when I got a taste of my own medicine. I couldn't believe it. They were going to owe me. So, for this final summer together, I booked the same week as usual, but made things clear. There would be no more group photos, no one else. This time, I would pay $9,200, too, but without anyone left out. I arrived at the beach house and set everything up meticulously. No more kids running around. Just me, my friends, and nothing on the agenda but fun in the sun. My first move was to ensure everyone knew this wasn't a typical summer vacation. I posted a status update. This year's family vacation is different. No group photos, no one left out. And then came the emails. Oh boy, did we get emails. They tried to talk me into group activities, insisting they needed their pictures too, but I had them where I wanted them now. By the end of each day, I would send a reminder. No one needs to see these pictures unless you want to. At first, there was resistance. One person even said, "Come on, it's not that big a deal," and another mentioned how I might be making things difficult for everyone. But their tone changed quickly when they realized that if anyone wanted their picture in the photo, they had to sit next to me. The final day arrived, and we all stood at the edge of the beach. I took out my phone, ready to snap the perfect shot. Everyone turned toward the camera except one person who was still sitting on the chair. With a grin, I snapped the picture. There it was. Everyone's face lit up in the sun, and mine had the best spot by the ocean. The email thread that followed was a mix of shocked and embarrassed. Someone even said, "You've really done this to us?" It was priceless. I just replied with one line. "That's the way it works when you play my game." By the end of the vacation, they were all laughing about how I had gotten back at them. We spent the days telling stories and making memories that weren't just on social media or in a photo. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. We are right about halfway. If you are still here, do me two quick favors. Hit that like button and hit subscribe so the next batch finds you automatically. And tell me down in the comments which story so far was the most satisfying one. Now, this next one might be my favorite of the whole batch. This was posted to our /malicious compliance. I knew from day one that my dad had a habit of taking advantage. But when he dropped me a handwritten bill for $180,000 for raising me, I decided it was payback time. It started innocently enough. We'd been talking about his retirement and how much he'd done for me. His tone was full of paternal pride, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was an underlying demand behind it. Then came the bill. It felt like a slap in the face, literally. The idea that after all these years, he thought I owed him money just because he fed and clothed me sparked something in me. I drafted a reply quickly, my fingers clacking on the keyboard as frustration bubbled up. I didn't plan it out too much. I wanted it to be direct and cutting. "Hey Dad," I began. "Thanks for your bill. You're doing great. I've been paying you back since age 18, but just in case you forgot, here's my itemized invoice." I printed up a few copies, each with the same message, and sent them out. Each was addressed to him personally. Here are some key points. 2004. College tuition, 3 years, at $5,000 per year equals $15,000. 2006 to 2017. Coffee runs, gas for the car, clothes equals $3,800. 2010 to 2013. Lawn care, cleaning, odd jobs at minimum wage, $8.50 per hour, equals $49,000. With 6% interest, 2017. Job training and experience equals $500. 2017 to 2022. Salary from his shop at $13 per hour with benefits. Less expenses for supplies, maintenance, etc. equals $98,240 with 6% interest. The total came out to $182,790, $2,790 more than the bill he sent. I kept it as an invoice, formal but not too legalistic. I signed each one, "Your daughter who owes you everything." A few weeks later, a package arrived on his doorstep. Inside was a single invoice, neatly folded and stapled with a handwritten note, for services rendered from 1985 to 2023. He hadn't signed it. He'd only written "Father" at the bottom. I received an email back that night. His response was short but stinging. "Sophia, I appreciate your attempt at humor, but we both know this isn't funny." It felt good to have flipped the script and seen him from a different angle. In his own shop, he'd taught me how to manage money, though he hadn't exactly taught me about gratitude. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /pro_revenge. A few weeks ago, my brother borrowed $22,000 from me for his business and laughed it off when I asked him to write a formal agreement. He thought because we're family, he could just do whatever he wanted. Well, he's about to find out. At the time, I was already working full-time and freelancing on the side. But my brother had this grand idea for his business that required more capital than what I had been saving up, without really thinking twice. Because let's be honest, he never took no for an answer. He asked me if I could loan him the money. I agreed, figuring it was a small price to pay for family support. What did we know about loans? No lawyers involved, just a simple promise and a handshake. Big mistake. A few months passed, and then came the fateful day when he asked me for an update on his business. He had this big grin on his face, like he was about to share some great news. Instead, I mentioned that we might want to formalize things with a signed agreement. He laughed at me, told me not to be silly, and said family didn't sue family. That's when it clicked. What the hell am I going to do if this doesn't work out? I was putting my own income on the line for his business venture. And just like that, I found myself in the uncharted territory of legal small claims court. I tracked down the signed note he had forgotten about, and then I went through a series of steps to file a claim. It wasn't glamorous. It involved filling out paperwork, providing evidence, and even attending an initial hearing. But here's where the fun began. Proving that yes, this was indeed my money and no, it wouldn't just be loaned without some sort of commitment. The court process was slow, But eventually, I got a date for a trial. The day arrived, and he showed up, all smiles and good intentions. We were in a small room with the judge and a few other cases being heard. I took my seat, handed over the signed note, and explained how much had been loaned, what it was for, and why we needed repayment. He stood up confidently, thinking that just because we're family, he could pull something off. But as he tried to argue his way out of it, pointing to family bonds and past loans between us, the judge patiently asked if there were any witnesses or records supporting this new arrangement. Suddenly, my story had traction. The trial ended with a clear ruling. I was entitled to repayment. My brother received an official order for $22,000 plus interest. It wasn't easy, but it was satisfying knowing that no matter what, we had to uphold agreements and respect the trust we should have had between us as adults. Now, he's been making regular payments, not just out of guilt, but because the small claims court didn't take any jokes from either of us. And every time I hear him laugh about family bonds, or that we never would have gone to court, it feels like a win. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /petty revenge. My life was a bittersweet mix of achievements and bitter mornings. But there's one thing that's been gnawing at my soul. My parents co-signing everything for my sister, but refusing anything for me. It's not about the money, because let's be honest, they've never had much to give in terms of financial support. No, it's about principle. I was working as a marketing manager and saving up for years before my sister finally bought a house with her parents' help. The only house available next to theirs. A dilapidated old shack that needed serious work. One day, this place went up for sale. My mind raced like a hamster on a wheel. Could I buy it without involving anyone else? The thought of my parents finally stepping in and saying yes was laughable, but the idea of me doing something on my own, that was empowering. So, I started saving everything, cut out unnecessary expenses, and within 6 months, I had enough for the down payment. The house was a wreck. Moldy walls, peeling paint, broken windows, classic fixer-upper stuff. But that's what made it perfect. I bought it outright in cash and moved right away. My parents were surprised by my decision to do so, but I let them stew on their own inertia. They never asked questions about where the money came from. They just watched as I tackled each problem one by one. Fixing up the house was a labor of love and hate. From replacing the roof to redoing the electrical system, it took months. But every dollar spent felt like a victory against their passive-aggressive decisions. Finally, after 6 long months, it was done. The place looked better than they ever would have helped me achieve. It wasn't just a house, it was my independence. I painted the walls in my favorite colors, bright red and neon yellow, and installed modern fixtures that screamed, "I'm on top of this." I even put up some nice art pieces, none of which they approved of. When my parents came over for the first time, their eyes widened at how beautifully the place had transformed. They didn't say much, but from the looks in their eyes, I could tell they were proud of me. Fast forward a year, and that old house is now a cozy little haven with a garden in full bloom. My parents still refuse to co-sign anything for me, but they've started asking questions about how I manage my finances. It's funny, the tables have turned. Now it's them who seem eager for advice. The day my sister called, wanting to borrow money for another house next door, was a moment of triumph. She asked casually if I could lend her some cash since our parents wouldn't help. I laughed and told her she should ask them directly. They were the ones who had always been there for her. "Come on, let's do this together," she said with a tone that used to come naturally. "Together? You wish," I replied. "I've got it all covered now." She was taken aback, but quickly recovered. We hung up, and as I sat in the new living room, sipping my coffee, I felt a mix of satisfaction and a hint of guilt. Maybe they were right. Sometimes you do need help. But for once, I had made a decision that wasn't about their validation. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /petty revenge. My mom had the whole family convinced that I was just plain selfish for no longer sending money her way. Well, at Christmas time, I decided it was about time she got a taste of what I've gone through. I always kept records of every penny I sent over the years. My mother never knew just how much I had given until now. Over 9 long years, I had coughed up a total of $61,300 in various bills and expenses for her. It was a hefty sum, no doubt about it. The reunion dinner was warm and inviting, the kind where everyone talked about old times and family traditions. My mother was sitting there, her usual smile plastered on her face, but I could see the curiosity behind her eyes as she tried to gauge how much I had been sending every month. I cleared my throat, a bit nervous as I placed my tablet on the table. Everyone fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. "Mom," I began, using a tone that was both casual and confident. "Before we start the traditions, can I make a quick announcement?" She nodded, her face showing signs of anxiety and curiosity. "Since you've been asking me about how much I abandon you financially, I figured it might be good to read out the numbers." I continued, my voice steady but firm. "I have been sending money for 9 years now, and in total, that comes to $61,300. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Some looked at me with surprise, others with a mixture of shock and sympathy for my mother. My mom's face contorted into a mixture of denial and disappointment. $61,300. I repeated, making sure everyone got the exact number. "Now, let's break it down. This isn't just about monthly payments. It includes groceries, medical bills, travel expenses, and even some personal items." I glanced at her with a mix of regret and satisfaction. "So, Mom, out of all that, which part do you call abandonment?" She tried to defend herself, but couldn't find the words. Instead, she looked away, clearly embarrassed. That moment felt like a turning point for everyone in the room. The silence was heavy as they processed what I had just said. My father looked at me with a mix of pride and concern. My siblings exchanged nervous glances before focusing on their plates. After a few moments of awkward silence, one of my older sisters finally spoke up, breaking the tension. "Well, that's a lot," she admitted. "I didn't know you had given so much." "Yeah," another family member chimed in. "But we all understood when you stopped sending money. We just didn't know the full extent." My mother tried to defend herself, but couldn't come up with an excuse. She looked defeated, her shoulders slumping. The aftermath was something else entirely. My mom tried to make amends, offering me some vague promises about starting over. But I wasn't buying it. Instead, I used that moment of family harmony to remind everyone just how much I had sacrificed for her without complaint. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /malicious compliance. You know those times when you feel like all the cards are stacked against you? Well, that's exactly what happened to me, and I'm here to share how it all played out. My parents, let's call them John and Jane Doe, were the proud owners of 6 rental properties. They had been running everything smoothly for years, and they knew I was the go-to person when it came to managing these properties. But then things took a turn, a big one. John and Jane wrote me out of their will. Yeah, you heard that right. Instead of leaving anything to me, they decided my younger brother, Alex, let's name him Alex for this story, would inherit all 6 rentals. Now, I was the manager of these properties without any official title or compensation because I volunteered to help them out since we were a family. But being left out of the will completely threw me for a loop. I was devastated. Here I was, putting in hours and hours of unpaid work just to keep their investments in good shape. And when it came time to be compensated, they wrote me out. That's when I realized something had to change. I had been managing these properties for years, but now that Alex would inherit them, he didn't have the same level of familiarity or commitment as I did. So, I made a decision. I resigned from my role as unpaid manager and gave John and Jane 30 days notice in writing. I drafted the letter with care. "Dear parents," it began. "After much consideration, I have decided to resign as the manager of your rental properties effective in 30 days. Then, I included my reasons for stepping down. This decision is due to the recent changes in my family's dynamics and expectations regarding my role. I also mentioned that Alex hadn't been involved in the day-to-day operations enough to step into my shoes. I sent them an email, which read something like this. Hi, Mom and Dad. As you know, we've had some discussions about your rental properties. After much consideration, I have decided to resign as the manager of your rental properties effective 30 days from today. This decision is due to the recent changes in my family's dynamics and expectations regarding my role. I hope that Alex can step into this position with a better understanding of our properties. If there are any concerns or questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Best, your son sent. Signed. And then I waited. 30 days felt like an eternity, but it was all the time I needed to find a new job and prepare for my departure. When the day finally arrived, John and Jane met with me in their home office. The meeting wasn't pleasant. They tried to soften the blow by saying they appreciated everything I had done, but I could see through their polite words. "We just don't think it's fair that you stepped down," Mom said, her voice wavering slightly. Dad looked at me expectantly, as if he wanted me to apologize or say something else. I kept my composure. "Mom, Dad, I understand your feelings, but I've already given a formal notice and 30 days is all the time that's necessary. I wish Alex well in his new role." Then they got down to business. They asked me about the financials and asked for a handover plan. I went through every detail: rent payments, maintenance requests, insurance policies, and even the monthly income from each property. It was like watching an execution. "Are you sure this is necessary?" Dad asked as he scrolled through my notes. "I'm certain," I replied calmly. Within those 30 days, I made sure everything was in order. I double-checked all the contracts, updated the maintenance records, and even wrote a comprehensive guide for Alex on how to handle each property. It was like leaving a treasure map behind. The last day came, and it happened almost without notice. John called me into his study, where he presented a new contract, an agreement that officially named Alex as the manager of their rental properties with full responsibilities and compensation. They were handing over what I had been managing for years to my brother. I shook hands with both parents, feeling a mix of relief and bitterness. It was done. Alex signed the documents and took charge. The new arrangement felt like they were trying to make amends by giving him all the power, like a game of musical chairs where someone else got to sit in your spot when the music stopped. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid awake thinking about how things could have been different. If only they had shown more appreciation or offered me some form of recognition for my years of work. But that wasn't their way. They always favored Alex over me, regardless of what we did. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. Real quick, like button, one tap. Seriously, it helps this channel more than you think. Subscribe too if you have not yet. And I want to hear it. Have you ever had a boss, a neighbor, or an in-law exactly like this one? Comment it below. Okay, the best payback is still coming. This was posted to our /pro_revenge. It started when my kid's aunt, let's call her Amy, snuck one over on me. She claimed both of my kids as dependents, just like that, on her tax forms, and voila, she got a nice refund check in the mail. It wasn't much to be going on, but it was a slap in the face. I mean, we've been taking care of our kids for years now. We bought them clothes, food, medical bills. Heck, we even paid their tuition at private school. Meanwhile, this so-called sister of mine had the nerve to take my kids and cash in on their status. I was livid, but there's no point in letting your blood boil over nothing. I decided to hit back hard, and I mean hard. I started by gathering all the proof I needed. Medical bills showing I covered every doctor visit, school records proving they only ever attended our house, even bank statements that detailed my monthly transfers to their accounts. Everything was there, airtight evidence of support. Then came the trickier part, sending it in. I contacted the tax agency and filed as the actual parent using these documents. Amy would never know what hit her until she opened up the envelope with her refund check and saw the letter inside. It read something like this. Dear Amy, we have received documentation suggesting that you did not qualify for the dependent's credit on your recent tax return due to lack of support records from the primary caregiver. Your refund will be suspended. Bam. A few weeks later, I got a call, this one from Amy, naturally. She was pissed. What do you want? She snarled down the line. I have proof that my children were supported by me and only me, I stated calmly. You can either claim what's rightfully mine or deal with the consequences. She didn't respond at first, just a long pause filled with the sound of papers shuffling. Finally, she spat out, fine, keep your kids. But this isn't over. After that, everything went quiet for a while. Then one day, I got another letter. This time, it was from the Internal Revenue Service informing me that my claim had been approved and I'd get a check for $10,357, the amount Amy had claimed for herself plus interest. Amy never called again, but now she probably wonders about every refund she gets. She might check first before claiming kids who don't really belong to her anymore. The game is over, and the ref went where it belonged, right into my hands. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /pro_revenge. I thought I had it all figured out when my grandma died last summer and left her old house in the suburbs to me in her will. Her place, her rules, no one messed with that. But my uncle, well, he's always been a bit of a self-important twerp. He claimed possession was 9/10 of the law, and promptly changed all the locks on the house. I couldn't believe it at first, but then I realized what he had done wasn't just rude. It was an outright theft from me as his beneficiary. He probably figured my family would be too tired and upset to contest him, but you know what they say about counting your chickens before they hatch? Yeah, that's what happened here. I sat down with a notary a few days later and got the recorded deed, just in case. I even called my brother, who lives out of state. He was pretty pissed off on the phone, but couldn't afford to fly back for this. That's when it hit me. I needed someone who could actually show up. The next day, armed with the deed, a signed demand letter, and my best detective friend from high school, we headed over to the house. I rang the bell, only to be met by an imposing security guard in a uniform that didn't exactly match the brand name on his badge. My uncle must have been expecting this. He opened the door himself, wearing a smirk that said he knew what was coming. "Uncle Tom," I said, stepping into the foyer, "can we talk?" He glanced over at the guy in the security guard uniform and just laughed. "I've already talked to someone about this." I looked him dead in the eye. "Actually, you haven't. You see, I brought someone who knows how to enforce my rights." I gestured towards my detective friend. Tom's smirk faded as he saw my backup. He called out to his guard, but before anything else happened, I pulled out the deed. "According to this, ownership is actually mine," I said, handing it over for a cursory look. "And by law, you need to turn over all keys and access codes immediately." He snatched it back and tried to stammer something, but my detective friend was already speaking up. "We have the legal documentation here," she said coolly. "The house is yours." Uncle Tom cursed under his breath and motioned for us to follow him to his office. Inside, he had a stack of papers ready, some kind of transfer documents, which I could see were suspiciously incomplete. "Listen," he said, "I'll get everything squared away by the end of the week. Just let me have the keys until then." "No," I replied firmly. "You've wronged me enough. Hand over what's mine now." After a long, tense silence, his shoulders slumped. He reached into his desk and pulled out all the keys and locks to the house. "Here," he said, shoving them at me. I accepted them, feeling a mix of satisfaction and disbelief that it was so easy. My detective friend noted down everything that had happened in their notebook, making sure nothing got lost or forgotten. As we were walking towards my car, Uncle Tom called out one last time, "Why did you come back for this? Can't you just move on?" I turned to him, feeling the weight of the day settle over me. "Because I didn't just lose a house," I said quietly. "I lost something I thought was mine by law and blood, and that's harder to reclaim." Uncle Tom had no comeback for that. He knew his mistake too late. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. I can't believe I'm doing this. But there's something about sharing the story of when my siblings turned on me, right after I died and long before anyone thought I would be gone. That just feels cathartic. Here we go. Growing up, my dad was always the family hero. He worked his ass off to give us a decent life, while still making sure everyone felt loved and supported. But by the time he passed away, all that work had left him with some financial challenges. Still, I thought it was only fair when one of my siblings suggested splitting our father's accounts among themselves and asked me to cover the funeral expenses. Funeral costs? No big deal, right? My dad didn't have much money anymore, but we could still afford a simple service, couldn't we? I signed off on $14,800 for the burial. A hefty sum, sure, but nothing compared to what he'd worked his whole life for. I just wanted to help make this easier on my siblings. But as it turned out, making things easier for them only made it harder on me. They split everything up among themselves, his savings, retirement accounts, even the family home they had lived in for decades. Not a penny went to me, not even an apology for burdening me with such a large expense. I was basically treated like a stranger at my own father's funeral. I felt betrayed and pissed off. How could I be expected to pay everything and then be excluded from the spoils? My siblings were acting like this was just business as usual, but it wasn't. This money belonged to me. My dad had left me his life insurance policy worth over $200,000, and that didn't count all the smaller stuff he'd saved up over the years. I decided I would get back at them for splitting our father's estate without acknowledging or compensating me. So, I went through some legal channels and filed a creditor's claim against their joint accounts to recoup the $14,800 funeral costs. It was like they were trying to prove that my involvement in the entire process somehow didn't count anymore. I mean, How could one of us not be part of our own father's funeral? But they treated me as if it wasn't a big deal, as if I had no right to anything. The battle wasn't easy. There was plenty of back and forth. I remember the first time I confronted them. Why didn't you just split things up properly and include me in the decision-making? My brother just shrugged. We thought this would be easier. Easier for who exactly? It was more like a slap in the face, like they were saying that my grief meant nothing compared to their financial comfort. But I kept pushing. I worked with lawyers, sent them letters, and even threatened legal action if necessary. They tried to argue that everything had been done according to their wishes and that it wasn't worth fighting over some funeral costs. But for me, it was about more than just a few dollars. It was about respect and acknowledgement of my relationship with our father. In the end, after months of negotiation and court hearings, they came around. I got every penny of those funeral expenses back, along with interest and compensation for what they had done. The lesson? No matter what you go through, stick to your guns and don't let anyone else dictate how much pain or loss you should endure just to be considered part of the family. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. Let's start right where things began to go wrong. It all started when my ex-wife, Sarah, passed away from cancer. Her parents lived in a different state, so I took care of sorting everything out and closing the house down. She had this beautiful gold band with an emerald that was her mother's. It meant everything to us. I didn't know about the ring until several months later when my mom called me out of the blue. She told me she'd found Sarah's ring at home, cleaned it up a bit, and wanted to give it to our younger sister, Emily, as a gift because they were close friends. At first, I was flabbergasted. No way would I take that ring from my late wife. But then, the old saying, hurt people do hurt things, came to mind. I knew I had to act fast. Sarah's parents had life insurance policies, and everything else was in order. The house she lived in with me was insured under our joint policy. I thought if I could just get my mom to file a claim, that would be the end of it. But you can't beat honesty, or so I thought. I called up the insurer and said we needed to report a loss because the ring had been stolen from our home. Of course, they asked for details, which is when things got interesting. They wanted an appraisal. I knew it was a lie, but figured it might be easier if everyone just went along with it. So I got it appraised at an expensive jewelry store. The appraiser valued the ring at $5,000. The insurer needed a police report too, which made me cringe. So I called up my old buddy Mike from the local PD and asked him to write one up for us. He was happy to oblige, saying he wanted some extra dough to fill his pants pockets. Next came the hard part, getting everything documented and submitted. I filled out all the forms myself, being careful not to sound too suspicious. The insurance claim was processed, and it seemed like nothing happened for weeks. Maybe they just didn't want to pay out, or maybe the paperwork was still being checked. A few weeks later, boom, they paid out $5,000. I immediately called my mom to share this good news. She was thrilled but confused. She hadn't even expected any money from it. I casually mentioned that we had found out Sarah's ring wasn't actually hers anymore, and thought it would be best if someone else could enjoy it. A few days after the payout, a check for $5,000 arrived at my sister's address. You can imagine her surprise when she got this windfall without any explanation. But not surprisingly, she wasn't too happy about being given something that was actually mine. Now, I know some of you might be thinking that's cruel, but the truth is, it served a greater purpose. I made sure everything was above board and legal, and in the end, my sister got what she deserved. No more reminders of her siblings passing every time she saw that ring. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /Skippy Moments. So here's how it went down. I graduated high school last week with honors, and my parents had promised me they'd be there through thick and thin, through the speeches, through the diploma ceremony, and of course, through my brother's baseball game. But then came that fateful day. My brother was playing in a crucial tournament, and the timing was perfect. The baseball field was right next to the high school stadium where we were graduating. I had planned for a week, checking weather updates every hour on the hour, just to make sure everything would go off without a hitch. Finally, I got the text. Are you ready for graduation? We'll see you there. My heart felt heavy because while my parents loved baseball more than life itself, they were my parents, and this was a huge deal. But then, on that day, of all days, they called me to say they couldn't make it. The game had been rescheduled due to rain. Their timing wasn't just poor, it was almost as if they knew I wouldn't be going without them. At first, I thought maybe the rain would blow over and we could still get there, but that didn't happen. So here's where it got really messed up. Instead of sending a heartfelt message about how proud they were or something equally nice to compensate for their absence, they went straight to asking if they could get a framed graduation photo. They even suggested I email them one so they could look at me whenever the game was over. This was the cherry on top of my crappy day. I knew right then and there that framing an empty seat would teach them more than any words ever could. So, after a tense evening where I debated whether or not to go through with it, I decided yes. It felt like the most satisfying revenge possible in this moment. The next morning, I went to class as normal but spent the whole time Googling how to make a simple frame without spending too much money. Finally, by lunchtime, I had what I needed. I grabbed one of my brother's graduation photos, cut it out, and stuck a big empty chair in front of him. Then I added a couple of words on the side. Presented for the parents who made me miss my own graduation. I knew exactly where to send this framed art. Late that afternoon, before driving home from school, I slipped it under their door without them knowing. The next day at work, they were still upset about missing graduation but seemed to be ignoring each other's attempts to talk about it. A few weeks later, my father came up to me and said, "You should see the framed photo in our living room." I was shocked. They had hung mine up? But then he admitted that my mother had seen it first and got a good laugh out of how empty the chair looked next to my brother. He went on to say that now, whenever someone asks them about the diploma photo, all they have to do is point at it and say, "This one's special." Special because it's a reminder of their mistake. And I think every time my mother looks at it, she'll remember exactly how much this mattered to me. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. This was posted to our /ProRevenge. I had always been the useless son, according to my family. From high school until I finally moved out years later, they treated me like a burden, never appreciating anything I did for them, even though it was more than they realized. I kept my head down and paid off 9 years of property taxes on our family home without saying a word. For some reason, I felt responsible to keep things in good shape while they squabbled over who would end up with what. Maybe it's just that little bit of pride you feel, or maybe because I knew the minute the house was mine, those bills wouldn't stop. Then came the day my mother called a family meeting about the estate after Dad passed away. As always, everyone was fighting over what belonged to whom. It was like watching Groundhog Day. The same old arguments and accusations flew across the room. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "You know," I said, voice steady but hard, "I just want this property to be sold, so we can all get a share of my father's estate without any drama. It's been enough." The room fell silent for a second before chaos erupted. My older brother jumped up, face red, and started yelling about how it wasn't fair that he'd had to pay the mortgage for years, too. His tone was so bitter, I almost laughed, but this was serious. Mom harumphed and said something about not wanting to be left with an empty house. Dad's sister piped up, saying that she needed a place to stay. It's like they never noticed me in the room. That's when it hit me. Actually, I began, cutting through their noise, I have proof. The silence was deafening now as everyone turned toward me. I took out my phone and showed them an organized stack of bills, proof that I had been paying property taxes on this house for 9 years, not a day less. At first, they all looked at each other, eyes wide, before turning their glare back to me. "How can you say?" My brother started, but I cut him off. "I can because it's true," I said calmly. "Not only did I pay these taxes, but I also invested a couple of grand into the foundation to make sure everything was in check." They didn't know what to say for a moment, clearly realizing that their version of events had just been flipped on its head. My mom, usually a master manipulator in our family, was speechless. The judge asked for proof and went over my documents meticulously. It was like he could see the relief flooding through everyone. "So you've been quietly keeping things in order," he finally said with a nod of approval. "Exactly," I replied confidently. "I just thought it was the right thing to do." In that moment, their faces shifted from disbelief to guilt to a mix of annoyance and regret. It wasn't a pretty sight, but it felt good, so damn good. The judge nodded again, confirming my claims and dismissing any further argument about who should get what. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I finally mattered, not just as someone they could lean on or look down on, but as an equal participant in our family saga. Let me know in the comments if you would have done the same. And that is going to do it for today's episode of Reddit Untold. If you made it all the way to the end, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is for, So do me two last favors. Tap that like button and hit subscribe so you do not miss the next batch. Drop a comment and tell me which story was your favorite and whether you would have had the nerve to do the same. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Before you close this, answer one thing for yourself. Out of those two people, which one is going to be you tomorrow night? Person 1 does not have to decide anything. That version arrives on its own, the same way it has arrived every night for years. Person 2 made one decision that took about a minute, once, and after that, their evening runs exactly like Person 1's. That minute starts in the first comment underneath this video. The pinned link sets the whole thing up. Already holding your phone? Then the code on the screen is faster than reading a comment. Camera on it, and you are in. Not choosing is still choosing. Closing this video hands you Person 1 again, and you already know how that month ends.